tonight. Israel marks a somber Independence Day as IDF troops push deeper into Rafah. The latest on Israel's war against Hamas and efforts to free the hostages.
Every day that passes is a matter of life or death for them.
Plus, President Biden hits China with a wave of new tariffs. What this escalating trade war means for the American economy. And
people are more anxious. They're concerned about their fate.
While Ukraine loses ground in the fight against Russia, analysts fear Moldova is the Kremlin's next target. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Fierce battles raging across the Gaza Strip tonight. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Tara Merger from the CBN studio in Washington. We begin with the escalating war in Gaza, where Israeli troops seek to eliminate Hamas' stronghold as the nation marks 76 years of independence.
While the IDF prepares to expand its operation in Rafah, troops once again are responding to terrorist threats in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. CBN's Brody Carter is following the latest developments. Brody.
Tara, John, despite warnings from the White House about going into Rafah, Israel is urging evacuations of civilians. Meanwhile, along the northern border invaded on October 7th, the focus is recapturing areas from returning Hamas militants. Sounds of war in Gaza serve as a grim reminder of the price of freedom, as Israel marked 76 years since it declared independence from the British Mandate for Palestine.
This ceremony taking place is a declaration from all of us that we will not let the enemy defeat us.
After 220 days of war thus far, more than 600 Israeli soldiers have died in the fighting following October 7th. As war escalates on multiple fronts, Qatari Egyptian officials seeking a ceasefire agreement say Hamas suspended any hostage negotiations due to Israel's military operation in Rafah.
It's a false narrative that there are negotiations going on.
Ruthie Bloom, a former advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, disagrees.
Hamas wants no agreement. Hamas's only agreement is that it remain in power, that Israel get out of Gaza, and that things go back to the way they were, so that Hamas can commit again and again and again the atrocities of October 7th.
As Israeli troops return to northern Gaza to clear Hamas terrorists for its second or even third time. Reported leaks from an IDF senior officer reveal frustrations over a lack of long-term planning for governing Gaza after the war.
First of all, much of it is leaked, of course, as you know. Any military man in Israel who goes public to say that, well, we can't win the war, he ought to go home. Okay, that's not his job as a military leader.
In Washington, House Republicans against the Biden administration's decision to withhold weapons for Israel are now pushing a bill to stop the delay.
And we have been very clear. We have been very clear about how we feel about our concerns, privately and publicly, about a potential major operation in Rafah. We have been very clear about the more than 1 million people who are living, who are now seeking refuge, to be more exact, in Rafah, and we want to make sure that their lives are protected.
For the first time, Israel has released its estimated civilian death toll in Gaza, claiming that 16,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. An Israeli government spokesperson has refuted the Palestinian Ministry of Health's estimates of approximately 35,000, stating that those figures are fabricated by Hamas to generate international condemnation of Israel's military actions. John, Tara, back to you.
All right, thank you. CBN's Brody Carter. Well, on this commemoration of Israel's Independence Day, Israelis carried deep wounds inflicted by Hamas on October 7th. One of the hardest hit places during the massacre was the site of the Nova Music Festival, where music, celebration, and dancing ended in bloodshed.
And now the site is sacred ground. On any given day, dozens, if not hundreds of people visit to honor the victims. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl takes us there.
The location sits in this beautiful park about 3 miles from Gaza. Placards remembering those killed and kidnapped, completed with small gardens and memorials, now fill the place.
Just want you to imagine over 3,000 people here dancing, trying to get away from all the horrors of life and then suddenly being reminded of how horrible things can be. They came here to enjoy. We never could have imagined what was going to happen next.
New Yorker Natalie Sanandaji attended Nova Festival as part of her vacation in Israel.
I danced amongst all these people. I was here, I was with them. I was dancing right next to them. Unfortunately for them, a lot of them weren't as lucky as me and they didn't make it out.
She's returned twice since then and recently shared her story with Mike Pompeo and his wife. Asleep when the rockets started early that morning, a friend urged Natalie to stay calm.
Try to imagine a festival happening anywhere else in the world where suddenly rockets are intercepted over people's heads and they react in such a calm manner. That simply would not happen. But unfortunately for Israelis, this is their reality.
Although they escaped, terrorists murdered more than 360 people there, taking about another 40 hostage.
I came to offer strength to the soldiers, to offer condolences to the people who lost their loved ones, and to give hope to those who hope their families will return.
Stacy Sokol from Beth Jacobs Synagogue in Beverly Hills came during a 3-day mission to Israel.
That it's nothing like what was reported. You don't get a sense of what was going on, of how the devastation, how bad it was. You know, they gloss over the Hamas killings.
Police spokesman Dean Elsden said it took weeks to identify all the bodies.
The monster is a compliment for the terrorists. Before my job, I worked in counterterrorism. I met Hamas face to face plenty of times. But this, to see what they would do if we didn't stop them from the drop in the bucket of operations that we do day to day, right here, this is it.
As a sign of moving forward, Israel's Forestry Service recently sponsored tree planting here in memory of those killed.
By the trees, we symbolize that the state of Israel is here to stay, and that's how we see it. And that's why we decide to celebrate life due to those horrific actions that were done here by Hamas, and to tell them, you can never break our spirit. We will keep on planting, we will keep on the life here in Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Re'im Park, site of the Nova Music Festival, southern Israel.
The trade war between Washington and Beijing is heating up. The Biden administration is announcing plans to slap $18 billion worth of tariffs on goods imported from China. The move targets Chinese electric vehicles, batteries, medical equipment, and other high-tech products. The White House says the tariffs will level the playing field for American industries.
It's no secret that the president, this entire administration, has been concerned about unfair practices by the PRC that harm American workers and businesses.
And with just 6 months until Election Day now, both Biden and Trump are fighting to prove who is tougher on Beijing. Over the weekend, the former president vowed to put a 200% tax on Chinese electric vehicles. Under Biden's plan, tariffs on those cars will quadruple from 25% to 100%.
While at the same time, tensions between the United States and China remain high. A record number of Chinese migrants have entered at the southern border. According to the House Committee on Homeland Security, border officials have encountered more than 24,000 Chinese nationals since last October. Most are single men who are caught illegally entering the country. Lawmakers scheduled a hearing this Thursday to address the potential national security implications. The issue has already become a talking point in the 2024 election, with former President Donald Trump claiming Chinese migrants are trying to build an army on American soil. Immigrants who spoke to the Associated Press say they came to the United States to escape poverty, oppression, and religious persecution.
All right, and here with us now is author, columnist, and speaker Gordon Chang. Gordon, welcome. Let's start with this trade war between the U.S. and China. After Donald Trump unveiled his wide-ranging tariff policy, China slapped tariffs on more than $100 billion in U.S. exports. According to some estimates, that retaliation cost nearly 300,000 jobs. The Biden administration is refusing to speculate on what could happen this time. What do you think?
Well, first of all, in 2008, Kara, China absorbed about 4/5 of the cost of the Trump tariffs. They did that through Chinese government policies, and also private exporters absorbed costs. So I expect the same thing to happen this time. I think that there is a lot of exaggeration when people talk about the costs that are going to be imposed on American consumers. But we got to step back and got to remember that after decades of misguided China policy on our part, we can't think that we're going to get out of this without some cost to ourselves. And we're going to have to do that because China's trade policies are extraordinarily predatory, and some of them are even criminal.
You know, concerning the report we just mentioned earlier, where the thousands of military-aged Chinese men are coming across the southern border, Gordon, do you share the same concern about claims China is trying to amass an army on the southern border?
Well, absolutely. You know, if we go back a couple of years ago, the Chinese migrants who are coming across the southern border were primarily family groups. And they were who they said they were. They were desperate Chinese. They wanted to live in a free society. But the composition has changed, and the U.S. Border Patrol now reports that something like 80 to 85% are single males of military age, traveling without family members, some of them pretending not to speak English, and Border Patrol knows some of them have links to the Chinese military. And we've seen some pretty disturbing behavior on the part of Chinese migrants. A website called Defiant America at the end of January posted pictures of Chinese migrants who had been in our country for less than 3 weeks, who came across with no money and no documentation, and they were taking target practice with pistols and, in one case, a sniper rifle.
Wow. Well, Gordon, Chinese President Xi Jinping is planning to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin this week as they mark 75 years of ties now. This no-limit strategic partnership has come under intense scrutiny by the U.S. and its allies following the invasion of Ukraine. Your thoughts?
Well, clearly China has supported the Russian war effort from the very beginning. I believe that Xi Jinping actually green-lighted it. We could tell from that no-limits partnership statement that was issued just 20 days before Russia invaded that Eastern European country. You know, the Biden administration has been issuing warning after warning to China about not providing lethal assistance. But from the very beginning of this conflict, that's exactly what China has been doing. So China has been trying to get away with as much as it can, and the Biden administration has been extremely reluctant to impose costs. They imposed some sanctions on about a dozen Chinese and Hong Kong companies, but that was essentially meaningless. If the Biden administration were serious, they would be disconnecting Chinese banks from the global financial system because they were money laundering for Russian enterprises.
All right. Author and columnist Gordon Chang, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, guys.
All right, up next, while Ukraine faces an uphill battle in its war against Russia, where Putin could be setting his sights as the next battleground. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinkin made a surprise stop in Ukraine today. He's in Kiev meeting with President Zelensky and members of his government. Blinkin said American military aid will make a real difference in the fight against Russia, even as Russia conducts a new offensive. Thousands of civilians have fled the fighting, and some analysts are calling it a dangerous moment for Ukraine.
Well, even while the war in Ukraine shows no signs of letting up, concern now turns to Russia eyeing the tiny country of Moldova.
That's right. And if Russia invades this small country's evangelical community, it would face a very dangerous future. CBN's George Thomas brings us this exclusive report from the region.
Alexander Belev remembers when, at 7 years old, 4 Russian KGB officers showed up at his parents' home in Moldova.
All us 5 siblings had to sit in one room as they searched the house for Christian literature, Bibles, and anything related to Christianity.
The agents found all sorts of Christian literature in the house that morning in 1982. They hauled Belev's father, a prominent underground Baptist pastor, off to prison, where he spent the next 2.5 years behind bars for his faith. This is video captured secretly that day of his father being led through prison gates. Several weeks later, the young Belev would visit his father. Belev, pastor of a church here in Moldova's capital city, Chisinau, now faces the prospect of enduring the same Christian persecution his father suffered 42 years ago.
2 years after the war in Ukraine, we know the very real scenario that Russia could easily invade Moldova, and if that happens, we'll have the same type of persecution that is happening today in the Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia and like it was during Soviet times.
Home to roughly 3 million people, Moldova sits between Ukraine and Romania. Russia's war against Ukrainian forces raging barely 100 miles from Moldova's border.
I have no doubt that the Russian military planning has an invasion of Moldova on its books, something they're thinking about and something they can easily do if they want to test the West.
So far, Ukraine has managed to stop Russians from advancing west of Kherson in their drive to take key strategic cities like Mykolaiv and Odessa, and likely preventing a potential march on Moldova.
Again, we are very thankful to Ukraine for their resistance because this is a guarantee for the peace in Moldova.
The spark that could ignite a potential Russian invasion of Moldova could happen right here in a region known as Transnistria. CBN News traveled to the pro-Russian breakaway territory of Moldova's northern front along Ukraine's border, where Moscow has in recent months stirred up political turmoil. We made our way through several checkpoints manned by Russian troops to the region's capital of Tiraspol, where a huge statue of Lenin adorns the town square. Pro-Russian rebels here have asked President Vladimir Putin for protection against what they claim are economic threats from Moldova's government. While the majority here in Transnistria would rather be part of Russia, they know that Moldova's recent tilt west and desire to join the European Union are giving the Kremlin heartburn. Experts believe Putin is using Transnistria as a Russian proxy to scuttle Moldova's EU aspirations.
People are more anxious, they're concerned about their fate and the possibility that they be forced to leave their homes because of an invasion.
Analysts warn that if Ukraine falls to Russia, Moldova will most certainly be the Kremlin's next target. George Thomas, CBN News, reporting from Chisinau, Moldova, and Tiraspol, Transnistria.
All right, churches and synagogues on alert how one company is using AI to protect houses of worship.
Welcome back. New video shows the threat of an armed gunman thwarted during a service at a Louisiana church this past weekend. A 16-year-old with a weapon disrupted a First Communion service at St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in Abbeville. The suspect never appears on camera, but you can see congregants get up from their seats while clergy crouch behind the altar. Parishioners confronted the gunman and called police. He was taken into custody for a mental health evaluation. This event happened just days after a man at a Pennsylvania church pointed a gun at the pastor during service. The increase in violence is causing church leaders to reconsider safety. The federal government recently approved $400 million in funds for security at houses of worship.
So scary. Well, while lawmakers on Capitol Hill work to keep houses of worship safe, so is a former U.S. Navy SEAL.
The veteran founded a company to protect venues like churches, schools, and synagogues from attack using artificial intelligence. CBN's Billy Hallowell has a story.
As concern grows over mass shootings, ZeroEyes co-founder Rob Huberty says his company is using artificial intelligence to protect potential targets like schools and houses of worship.
So what we do is we take your existing video cameras, that's what we need to use, and we process every frame by frame, every image, every video feed that you have that are your cameras, we don't install anything. And we use our AI that goes over them, and what it does is it looks for guns that are exposed.
Within seconds, ZeroEyes pinpoints the types of guns being brandished and alerts first responders about the nature of potential threats, as well as the types of weapons assailants might have. Dominic Iacco at Lansing Catholic High School in Michigan says this can offer peace of mind to his school community.
My initial reaction was basically, how can we not do this? When you look at kind of the tragic history of these types of scenarios and you see the advantage of the response time that ZeroEyes gives you, You know, as an administrator of a school, obviously you never want something like this to ever happen, but you also want to know that you've done everything possible to make the school as safe as possible.
Matt Montana, safety director at Valley Baptist Church in Bakersfield, California, agrees.
People want to do us harm. And when I say us, I mean men and women of the Christian faith. Not only the faith-based communities. For whatever reasons, because we live in a broken world, there's a lot of sin out there, and the innocence is preyed upon.
His church is preparing to roll out ZeroEyes, and Montana, who worked for years in law enforcement, says the real-time intelligence can help mitigate threats and save lives.
What we're doing here, that in itself may deter somebody who has thoughts of doing harm to people at Valley Baptist Church.
While Huberty is fully aware of privacy concerns regarding AI, he says his company has intentional safeguards in place.
You know, we view ourselves not as the total solution, but as a layer that makes sense. There's no predictive analytics. We're just looking for an object, which is a gun. We're just trying to be the best in the world at seeing guns and trying to give that information to first responders and those who can do something about it first.
With mass shootings and acts of violence increasingly directed at synagogues, churches, and faith-based schools, ZeroEyes is offering a viable option for leaders looking to increase protections. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
Coming up, a heartwarming Sunday surprise next on Faith Nation. And finally tonight, a day of celebration for an Arkansas couple and their church.
Well, when Samara Hernandez decided to get baptized this past Sunday at Summit Church in Little Rock, her boyfriend Tim Davis was right there by her side, showing that his support runs deeper than just the spiritual. He also got down on one knee and then proposed right there on the church stage.
I love you so much, and I can't wait to just follow Christ with you for the rest of our lives. Will you marry me?
Cheers and excitement. It didn't stop there, though. The couple decided, since we're here at the church, why not go ahead and get married, planning a wedding ceremony in one afternoon. They tied the knot Sunday evening with friends and family, putting a bow on what I would say, Tara, is a pretty unforgettable day.
Exhausting.
Exhausting, but also exhilarating.
Exactly.
Thanks for watching Faith Nation.
We'll see you tomorrow.